And we are live. Welcome to another episode of Business Focus Live with me, John, where we talk about business related topics as well as news from here and around the world. If you're new to this channel, don't forget to subscribe and let's get started. And we're back. Thank you again for joining me today. In this week's episode, we'll be talking about a few interesting topics or news that has happened in the past week or so. So let's get started. So first, we'll be talking about how one of the favorite pastimes, Americans' pastimes in the United States, which is playing baseball here. But sad to say, with recent news regarding there's going to be a lockout with there's a rift between the Players Association as well as the owners themselves. Now, is this going to prolong, or would they be able to resolve this? Because obviously, the players will lose out in millions, and billionaires, will lose out money as well. But question is there going to be a long-term repercussion here? We'll delve deeper into that. Next is we'll be talking about a Chinese company, a ride sharing company, Didi, is now going to delist in the New York Stock Exchange. We're going to find out what's the reason behind it and what's the repercussion for the company as well as for the shareholders as well. Next is a Chinese company, an electric vehicle or EV company with the name of Hycan, has raised significant capital to boost its market share by offering electric vehicles for the Chinese market here, and it'd be interesting to see what type of electric vehicle do they have. Is there any differentiating factors with other companies like Tesla and so forth? Next is we'll be talking about one of the biggest semiconductors in the world, Nvidia, who recently is planning or has acquired another company, ARM, which produces several key components for several big companies. FTC is blocking this acquisition because of its unfair repercussions, and big companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon are up in arms with regards to this situation. So we'll take a look at that as well. And lastly, we'll talk about a company, despite the pandemic, has created a new niche by offering a new club or sort of a hangout place for rich people, for very affluent people. Will it be a sustainable business model? We'll take a look at that as well. Anyway, so for first and foremost, so we were talking about how MLB is in lockout mode recently, and if you're a sports aficionados in the United States, MLB or Major League Baseball is one of the favorite pastimes of Americans here, and it's only popular obviously in the United States and parts in Asia, in Taiwan, and even in Korea as well as in Japan, being able to send some foreign players here, as well as in South America, before I forget. Anyway, so the what would think that there's a agreement between players and owners. They call it the CBA, or collective bargaining agreement, that they have certain agreements regards to how revenue sharing is going to be split up. Does the owners take more of the cut, or does the players take more of the cut here, and so forth. And sad to say, with the ongoing negotiations, breaking down, the owners themselves decided that it would be best to institute the lockout, so stopping any further negotiations. And what's interesting here is that that this could spill all the way to next year, and obviously is by next year, fans could be missing out a lot. Meaning, will there be a shortened season, or will it be a total waste of a season here? And obviously there's going to be a major repercussions here, not just for the sport itself, but for the fans who's supporting the sport itself. Anyway, so let's take a closer look here. So here we have an article from CBS Sports. As mentioned, the MLB lockout, fact-checking Commissioner Rob Manfred's open letter to baseball. So trying to explain as to why the lockout was necessary, and obviously you can take it however you want, whether he's trying to justify the lockout, or is he more pro players or more pro owners here. We'll take a closer look here. So he has mentioned a lot of things, so let's start off. So, announcing and advancing justification for the owner lockout that presently afflicts baseball. So, according to MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, indulged in two reliable blight, open modernity. So, the open letter and rank dishonesty, costume, public relations messaging here. Anyway, let's take a look at what he focused here. The letter to baseball fans, which attempts to blame the players and the union or players union for the first sports first work stoppage in more than 25 years. So meaning this has happened before. So in the early 90s. So I wasn't still a big fan of sports at the time, or baseball anyway. So the entire thing, if the jurisdictional spirit moves you, even if it does not, here to highlight a few of Manfred's calculated inaccuracies. So let's take a look at what he said here. So despite the league's best effort to make a deal with Players Association, so obviously they've been communicating with both sides so they can hammer out a deal that is, I wouldn't say beneficial to either one, but that's a compromise of sorts for both parties. That's something they could live with, right? And question is, what's the sticking point that's holding up from ironing out or completing the agreement here? So let's see here. So they're saying that they're unable to extend the CBA here. So they have been forced to commence a lockout of major league players effective 12/01 December 2nd. Now, obviously, if they were to proceed as if their operations is as normal, obviously owners, business owners, or team owners would have to pay salaries for employees as well as for players themselves, and obviously they don't want to do that if they know there's no upcoming seasons. And obviously for any sporting event, there's not just the actual seasons and the playoffs all the way to the championships. There's also the preseason, spring training that they call. So it creates a different cascading effect from where it begins to the lockout, and it would affect how long before they can settle the issue before they can restart the season here. And I think there was mentioned that the hard deadline is going to be set at around February. So if they cannot settle it by then, the season may be at a lost cause here. Despite considering the pandemic just happened last year, and they were able to cobble a season despite that. Anyway, let's focus on. So there are two parts that Manfred's letter. So despite the league's best effort to make a deal and forced to commence a lockout. So here it says on the first one, no reasonable standard have owners made their best efforts to forge a new CBA. Okay. For quite a long time, years really, we've all known that players' goal in this negotiation would be to get younger, pre-arbitration or pre-free agency players on whom teams have become increasingly reliant, paid more in line with their field value. Now, obviously, money is the bottom line here for any segment of the business, whether it's sport or any other industries here. And obviously, the main commodity here are the players here. And typically, they're given, when they're initially signed to their first contract to play for the Major League Baseball, I forgot how many years they're given. Now, for the NBA, their initial contract is around 4 years before they are extended or renewed, so to speak. I think it's longer for baseball, and the issue here is not just the length of the contract. So the amount of money that's being provided for the initial contract. Now, typically the top selections, or in the case of the NBA, top lotteries tends to get the higher salary for being the top selection or top 5 selections here. Anyway, obviously the players here obviously want to reduce that initial length of contract. So let's say from 6 years to maybe to 4 or even 3, so that if their value has risen within the first few years that they've been playing, they could essentially increase their value there. And obviously that benefits the players, but obviously teams have to pay more to be able to get their services. And I think that's where the crux of the issue here. And should teams allow players to go to free agency as early as possible? And with regards to the arbitration here, obviously discussion between both sides has been ongoing ever since. So who gets the leverage here? Does the team get more leverage on the players, or the players have more leverage on the team? Now, for the teams, typically they have more leverage. Obviously, they control your destiny as to whether they sign you, they sign you to a contract and so forth. On the other hand, for players, unless you're a very popular or a superstar player with the likes of, let's say, Shohei Atani or uh, who else is number one, or Scherzer, of all pitchers, or uh, what's the name of that other teammate? I forgot. Anyway, so unless you're a big superstar baseball player, you can command your own salary by the time you hit free agency. That's a rarity rather than a normal occurrence here. So, as mentioned here right now, these players are underpaid to unseemly extremes. So I think that's the main issue here. So typically, your initial contract may be, I think they're earning hundreds of thousands, and compare that to NBA minimum salary that goes into the millions already. So they made a large headway here. Now, obviously, baseball teams have more players than NBA, so that can be construed here. But if you look at another sports like NFL or the National Football League, even if they have a 53-man roster, they can afford to pay, superstars like Patrick Mahomes 30, 40, or even $50 million per season here. If you have the value, I think should be able to command more of it. So should there be a salary cap, which is, I think, another issue that the teams have been arguing. Obviously, for players, they don't want to have a cap, because if there's a salary cap, it limits as to how much you can pay each players here, which is, another issue altogether. Anyway, on a broader level, the union wants to be more competitive with one another, which I think is reasonable. Obviously, you don't want any teams, those who can afford big markets like New York or Los Angeles, being able to pay more money for the best players, and then for small market teams like, let's say, Oakland. Who else? Not familiar with the other teams, but obviously there are smaller markets they can afford, so they have to make do with their budget, regardless of the salary cap that they have. Now, obviously, for the players, as mentioned, they want to be they want to they don't want to have a cap, so to speak, so they can be paid as much as they want. So it's up to the teams to spend wisely as to which players do they want to acquire here. It goes to say none of this is surprising, and those central concerns must be at least discussed if negotiations are to be remotely fruitful. Owners, though, haven't been willing to engage in these points. And I think, it's money always at the end of the day. And what's interesting here is, if they don't get these things right, if they throw away the season, then meaning baseball fans won't be able to watch their games, and the money that they could generate, regardless of what the sharing is or the agreement is, will be fruitless or wasted, so to speak. And just to make a comparison here, so actually, I thought the MLB is the one of the more popular sports in the United States. Well, based on the TV deal that the different sports have been getting this past few years, the NFL, surprisingly enough, which I found out that they just renewed their contract with several TV networks, from CBS, ABC, NBC, and Fox, and I think who else? I think there are 4 or 5 networks. But anyway, they got a TV deal in the north of 100 billion, 110 billion at that, for the next 11 years. So you can just imagine each year that they're going to generate on the TV deal alone. That's going to get you $10 billion each year. So imagine the slice of pie you're going to share with your teams here. And obviously, the teams tends to get more of that pie, and obviously the players also wants to get that pie. That's why they want their minimum salary to be increased, which is obviously being debated here. And based on the recent CBA with NFL, obviously it's not ideal, but they continued with business as usual, so that they can continue maximizing their revenue here. So that discounting the revenue they generate from the arena, the revenue they generate from merchandise, as well as the revenue they generate from ancillary businesses, from vendors and merchandise and so forth, right? So you can just imagine the numbers that's been thrown around for the different businesses. And obviously, the players, especially if you're in the NFL, it's a contact sports. You can get hurt, and you could lose your career quickly. Obviously, you want to maximize your value and worth with the limited time for any athlete, regardless of sports here. And if we look further, so not just the NFL who's making a killing in terms of their TV deal because a lot of people are watching. You also have NBA, who recently signed a deal worth in the north of 75 billion for the next 9 years. So it's not nowhere near close to NFL, but still that's a lot of zeros. And you could just imagine the salaries for each player will now increase for the NBA players, meaning they're able to pay more for those superstars. So not just paying them in the north of 30-40 million dollars a year, maybe even reach the ceiling of 50 million and above here. Obviously, at the end of the day, it boils down to who are the TV viewers who's watching those sports, and if there's a lot of viewers watching it, they'll be paying a lot of money for that. Sad to say, for MLB, it pales nowhere close to the other leagues as I just mentioned. They had an agreement with, I think it was ESPN, for $7 billion for 7 years arrangement. So you can just imagine the amount they're only generating, less than $1 billion. For NBA, it's close to 8 billion, and then you have NFL 8 billion. So you can see right away which sports are people tuning in. Now, one of the problems for MLB is the length of the game. Actually, typically takes 2 to 3 hours. I've tried watching it. Unless it's the playoffs, I would not watch the whole game. I would rather watch it in highlights. For NBA, that's roughly about an hour or so, an hour or 2 hours. Then for the NFL, yeah, more or less similar in that boat. If it goes to overtime, and the excitement is always there because it's obviously very very physical, so to speak. So obviously baseball is more is slightly different, obviously with the pitching and the hitting. So there are idle moments, so to speak. So obviously the name of the game here is, would people pay for watching those games? Now obviously there's still a market for that, and obviously if MLB doesn't get it correctly, regardless whatever the commissioner says, or whether it's the fault of the players or the team, at the end of the day, the fans lose out. And the sad thing is, it's not just the fans who lose out, who don't get to watch the games, but also employees within the arena who's working, on a per game basis and so forth, and other ancillary businesses within the arena who's supporting the business. Let's say you're offering logistics from the downtown city going to the venue and back and forth and so forth. So if there's no games, there's no business for the rest. And what's interesting here, they're willing to go to a lockout. What they're not forgetting, which is I think a very concerning aspect, is there are alternative sports. As I mentioned, it's not just the NFL. You have NBA, you have tennis, you have soccer, NHL, on and on and on. And if the league is not wise enough to consider that, fans could just shift to another sports. In my case, if I don't watch MLB, it's okay. I could still watch NBA, and especially when MLB continues their negotiations by next year, by January or February, the NFL is already in their playoff modes, and a lot of people are going to watch it, which I find it astonishing how many people are watching the NFL. Tens of millions of people, and culminating in the Super Bowl or the championship, equivalent championship for the NFL, almost 100 million people are watching that game. You could just imagine the eyeballs that are watching it. So it becomes more attractive to businesses, to advertisers. That's no wonder I was surprised that a lot of companies are willing to pay millions and millions of dollars to have a spot in their TV ads in between breaks from the game. Obviously, if you're watching NFL, the Super Bowl, you're glued into that channel the whole time, so you'll watch the entirety here, talking to your friends and families while waiting for the resumption of game. That's why a 30-second spot is costing $5 million, I think. And not just the spot in the adverts, but as well as in the halftime show. So you could just imagine the money it makes on top of that. And I think the latest reports, the last Super Bowl was considered in the low end, less than 100 million, but still, compared to the NBA or even the Major League, if they can even get close to 50 million people watching nationwide or worldwide, I think that's a big coup already. So meaning, whatever Roger Goodell is doing in the NFL, promoting it, meaning people in the United States are really, big fans of the American football, not the soccer that they get, sometimes they get it confused. Anyway, so here's to hoping that they can settle their issues and move forward, because at the end of the day, you know, if you take pride in with regards to this business decision making, at the end of the day, if no one wins here, the players lose out, the team owners lose out, even if they can sustain the not functioning, or the teams not operating, there still be billionaires, but still fans will lash out. And if they think that for millionaires fighting with billionaires and they can even settle their issues, then why would regular Joes or regular peoples like us, support the sports that we grow to love and and watch? So we'll see. Anyway, segueing now to international news. So we have a Chinese company, a ride-hailing company named Didi, is delisting from the New York Stock Exchange due to pressure from Beijing. So this is according to Forbes.com. Now, obviously, Didi is a very popular ride-sharing, similar to how Uber and is it Grab? Yeah, Grab works, and it's very popular in the United States. Now, obviously, for a company to continue to grow, they plan to expand their business by getting more investors, by listing or having their IPOs in different stock exchange, typically in the United States, whether in the New York Stock Exchange or somewhere else. But with recent accounts, or what do you call this, recent curtailing of the government, so many companies, in particular in China, are being dictated to be careful in terms of how they grow their business, in a sense. And the government is stating that there are security concerns here. So we'll take a closer look if the government has any merits to any whatsoever here. Okay. So as mentioned, it will delist from the New York Stock Exchange and prepare a public listing. So it will be shifting from different regions, from the United States all the way to Asia, in particular to Hong Kong. Obviously, there are pressure from the Chinese regulators, who are barred companies from signing up new users and ordered a cybersecurity probe into its practices here. Now, are there any security breaches that the Chinese government are focusing on? We don't know here. Now, is there any, because of the tension between the United States and China, trade issues are ongoing? One can only assume so much. But anyway, going to the article here. So the company had already officially mentioned this in the Chinese social media platform Weibo, after stating the decision was taken after careful research. Anyway, instead of so the question here is, what will happen to the shareholders who bought in the company here? So what will happen, instead of buying all out the publicly held shares, which could be costly, obviously, a move that would cost the company billions. So what they did instead, so they did delist from the New York Stock Exchange shares, while ensuring that they are convertible into shares by shifting to the Hong Kong Stock Exchange here. So whether that's beneficial if you're an investor here, could be problematic, but obviously there's always risk when you're investing good sums of money here. As mentioned, the ride-hailing giant noted that it will organize a shareholder meeting on the issue on the appropriate time in the future. Now, obviously, do you hold on to that share, or do you sell it ASAP? Anyway, citing a name source, Reuters previously reported that Didi's top executives were pressured by the Chinese regulators to come up with a plan for delisting over data securities. And I think it's not just China here who has concerns with data security or breaches here. Cybersecurity, I think it's a common problem, not just for small businesses, but big businesses, and if there are data breaches that is occurring, and people can hack your system and get valuable information from the business itself, as well as maybe even your customers, could be detrimental, and obviously the trust from your consumers will be soured, and to the point of leaving your patronage and so forth here. Question here is it more than just cybersecurity, or is it something more sinister, or something, as I mentioned earlier, with the ongoing spat between the US and China relationship here? uh, as mentioned, so the New York Stock Exchange, they were able to raise 4 billion, which is good news for them. But obviously, the Cyberspace Administration of China, or CAC, ordered mobile apps in the country to remove 25 apps operated by Didi and bar the company from signing up new customers. So meaning they don't want any more breaches happening, or they want to maintain the privacy of their existing customer base, which is kind of confusing here. But anyway, the question here is, what will happen to the company? Will they still be able to expand their businesses abroad, or will they be stuck only in the United States here? So only time can tell here. Anyway, next we have another Chinese company who's making a lot of headway here. So more on the good news here. So not an EV company here of Hycan. Obviously, electric vehicles have become more popular in recent years with the introduction of Tesla EV vehicles from the Model 3 and the Tesla Plaid. So other companies, not just American car manufacturers, you have Japanese car manufacturers, and now even Chinese manufacturers are trying to delve into the EV market here. Now, obviously, there's still a lot of issues in terms of people adopting electric vehicles here, as I mentioned in previous discussion with the software issues that Tesla has. If they're going to be reliant, if they're going to offer that full self-driving feature, which is another issue. And then the battery issue, I think, is the main core component, and having enough capacity to last you, let's say, similar to how you would use your combustible engine here. So you go to a gas station, fill it up in a few minutes. Can the current chargers or superchargers from Tesla or other companies do it quickly also, so that you can go on your ways and do your own activity? So far, that's not possible yet. And obviously, they are making headways in terms of improving technology, so that instead of waiting for 2-3 hours, can be lessened to less than an hour, which they are doing. But obviously, the reliability, the safety issue, catching fire, it's not good for battery because it can explode here. But anyway, so let's see here. So according to CNBC.com, the Chinese electric car startup Hycan has claimed funding of more than 300 million, which is on the way here. Okay, so obviously funding is important for any companies or startup companies that's trying to grow. You need investors left and right, and good thing for them, they're in China, and China has been the Chinese government has been a big proponent for shifting to an EV market, or probe EV market, car-centric electric vehicle. So a lot of Chinese companies have been investing in investing in the EV. Now, obviously, you also have Tesla investing in the China market, wanting to capitalize on its popularity. But obviously, it's difficult to dominate in that particular market, because customers or consumers tends want to buy very interesting, I would say interesting, affordable but high valued items, in this case vehicles with lots of features, but it has to be practical as well here. Anyway, let's see. So as early this year in January, they were able to raise 2 billion yuan, or 300 million as mentioned, from its big investors here. So the financial backing, according to its CEO, Yin Yang, is that right? Yeah. So according to the CEO of Hycan, Yin Yang, Kind of interesting name, no? Yin Yang. Anyway, so obviously the company here is not I won't say a long company or established one. They were only recently established. The company Hycan was only founded way back in 2018, so roughly around 3 to 4 years, which is under the name of GAC Neo. Now, GAC is a big player in China here, so it's a subsidiary of the company. So obviously, trying to expand your market not just on combustible engine, but also investing in other forms of transportation, or EV in this case. So question here is, will it be a success here? Now, I was looking in one of the videos, looking at what it looks like. Wait, there was, yeah. So they recently launched this last year, actually, the 20, is it last year or this year? I don't know. The 2020 Hycan 007. Does it have, what an interesting name. Anyway, so it's an SUV type EV vehicle. Now, what's interesting here, obviously, it has the typical features from a SUV. Now, looking at its interior, what's interesting is it looks somewhat similar to a Tesla vehicle here. Now, the dashboard is the key here, and I have issues with this one. Now, obviously, for a Tesla vehicle, you can see there's a sort of an iPad or tablet that's, it's very touchscreen based, not anything, there's any dials, anything that's tactile. My issue here is if your screen were to crash, or were there any problems to happen in the future, how can you fix it? You have to go to the dealership and get it fixed, right? And obviously, with our current vehicles here that still uses on dials, traditional meters and so forth, you can replace it independently or separately here. And actually, one of their dashboard is, it occupies half of the vehicle. So from the dashboard of the driver's side all the way to the center console, where you typically has the adjustment for your temperature control, audio controls, music, and so forth. You can just imagine you have to replace the entire screen here if it, if it's broken, or if it's chipped, or whatever it is. So I think that's one of my main issues. I don't know for the rest, but can be problematic here. But obviously, the features, as I mentioned, incorporating more technology here, infrared sensors for better safety, and I think the one that we just discussed before, where Tesla was offering Sentry mode, so it can detect a 360-degree view, so there will be no more sort of a blind side for drivers here. I think that could be tremendous here, so obviously increase the safety for all drivers here. But the question here is, will the adoption be higher in the future, or will it take longer than necessary here? Will it be just a sort of a kit car, similar to how sports car are? So it's more on a luxury and excess if you can afford it, rather than a basic necessity here. Anyway, next, we have, what's the next one? Yeah, so one of the biggest companies in the world, the semiconductor company Nvidia, who recently acquired ARM, which is another big company that produces, what do they produce? Let me search online. ARM company. So ARM, so they're also a semiconductor, actually, now I recall. So they actually, ARM licenses their technology to other companies, whether it's be Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and so forth. Now, obviously, for a company like Nvidia or any big multinational companies, their goal is to increase their market position, by obviously expanding their business, by also acquiring other businesses. And obviously, you have other companies who've acquired other businesses. You have Microsoft, who recently acquired Bethesda, a gaming publisher, who produce popular games such as Elder Scrolls, as well as Fallout series. And then you also have Amazon, who acquired Twitch to supplement their streaming services and so forth. And then Facebook, who acquired Instagram to strengthen its social media platform and so forth. So obviously it makes sense for Nvidia to acquire a similar company within their industry of ARM. But the problem here is other big companies like as mentioned, Microsoft and Google are crying foul that it's unfair for them uh, to acquire them because it would affect their business model. So let's take let's take a closer look. Now, according to what's the article from? According to TheVerge.com, so FTC is suing to block Nvidia's 40 billion purchase of ARM. So acquiring ARM is not a small feat. So 40 billion is a lot of zeros, but obviously these big multi-billion companies or trillion companies have the necessary resources to be able to acquire big businesses. The question here is, will it benefit the market at the end of the day? Now, obviously, the ones who's complaining are big businesses as well, so it's not the consumer here. Will this have an effect on the retail or on the end consumer here with regards to if actually Nvidia were able to acquire ARM here? Will it affect the other businesses from other industries, whether it's in Apple, in Microsoft, or Google, and so forth here? So let's read further. So FTC is stating that the deal would stifle competing next generation technologies. Now, obviously, with semiconductors, it's always evolving here, continue to evolve here. And obviously, if your company is at the forefront here, you'll have the competitive advantage. And I think one of the main concerns with the acquisition of ARM is that the possibility that when ARM is licensing their technologies to other big companies here, there could be a stifling of growth, or maybe divulging of secrets of what other big companies are using to leverage their position in different aspects, whether in cloud-based or in mobile and desktop and so forth here. Anyway, as we look further, so the FTC is suing to block the merger of the ongoing due to concerns that the combined companies would stifle competing next generation technologies, as mentioned here. So the suit comes after the FTC investigation into the deal following complaints from, as mentioned, you have Google, Microsoft, and Qualcomm, who have kind of interesting, have dominance in their respective fields, whether it's in software, desktop software, online software, or cloud-based software, or mobile, and they're complaining here. Obviously, all of those companies are using ARM-based technologies to supplement their devices here. So obviously, they should be concerned here. But the question here is, will it affect the consumers at the end of the day? Will it necessitate an increase in price, decrease in price? And as mentioned here, will there be a stifle of innovation here? Because would companies be afraid to not use the proprietary technologies or softwares that ARM has here? So FTC is suing the largest semiconductor chip merger in history, to prevent a chip conglomerate from stifling the innovation of pipeline for next generation technologies. Now, that can be said for other companies as well, right? So we were discussing about the issue with the Apple App Store, and as well as even the Google Play Store. They have a monopoly of that. If other companies were to try to develop a platform, doesn't those companies stifle competition as well? Kind of find it interesting that the FTC chose this particular merger as a tipping point or threshold that this should not be allowed. But other companies who have been acquiring other large companies to their benefit, obviously, despite stifling innovation or even stifling consumer protection here, so to speak. Anyway, they're going to say that tomorrow's technology depend on preserving today's competitive cutting-edge chip markets. Actually, that could be applied to other industries as well. So the concern here is it would distort ARM's incentive in chip markets and allow combined firm to unfairly undermine Nvidia's rival. Now, obviously, Nvidia is known for making some of the best or biggest GPUs in the world, which I haven't acquired ever since. Obviously, there are questions that need to be raised, and does it merit the stoppage of the merger here? Obviously, the FTC is sending a strong signal that will act aggressive to protect the critical infrastructure markets from illegal vertical mergers that have far-reaching and damaging effects in future innovation. Now, kind of funny that they're only focusing on Nvidia. Then they should look at other companies as well. As I mentioned, you have Amazon, you also have Google, Apple. Typically the tech companies that are acquiring companies left and right and diversifying their business portfolio, which is tremendous on their part, because obviously that's their prerogative to grow their business tremendously. But obviously, along the way, in doing so, they are trampling, uh, acting in their own best interests rather than the interests of, let's say, the consumers and so forth. But that's another discussion here for another day. Anyway, lastly, we were talking about, despite in the pandemic, businesses are still trying to recover from last year, as mentioned, or even from this year as well, hoping for better horizons. A company has started a private club or social club of sorts that's charging a hefty sum. Now, will it be a sustainable model here? Who knows here? Now, obviously, this particular social club or venue for hanging out is somewhat different because they're pegging it an exclusive one, as mentioned. They're calling it the Zero Bond. And you have to pay a annual fee of 3,000. Now, obviously, for affluent people, 3,000 bucks may not mean much, but for the rest of us, 3,000 is a lot of money. We could use it for better, applications. But anyway, according to businessinsiders.com, a private NYC or New York City social club that's attracted visitors like Elon Musk and Kim Kardashian, which you have to pay a 3,000 annual fee, and called Zero Bond. Now, why Zero Bond? It's not necessarily you're paying for free. You have to pay a hefty amount actually here. Anyway, so is it an enticing venue for people to congregate? Now, obviously, there are a lot of places to hang out in New York, but will Zero Bond be the place to be here or to be seen here? Now, Kim Kardashian, Elon Musk, okay. So, is it for get-together, seeing popular people, famous people, and so forth, or is it something more for networking purpose? I don't know. Let's see here. So the Zero Bond is a private social club, as mentioned, founded by the brains behind One Oak, which opened last year. Okay, so it's a members-only club which attracted A-list celebrities, politicians, and business people. I think it's more for meeting up, for networking purposes here. Now, obviously, if people want to bunch up together, I don't know why would famous people group together in the same place. It's already very crowded in a sense, but to each his own, right? But anyway, they're selling a $3,000 annual membership fee, and an additional 1,000 initiation fee. So that's total of 4,000 bucks here. So it's 200,000 pesos already. So pretty a hefty sum. So I'd rather buy a car rather than be a member here. Assume I could get it. Anyway, so if we were to look inside, so it's nothing too, what I call this, too drastic here, too different than in other places. Now, obviously, the venue is trying to be a cozy place for people to congregate, to talk, to relax, and wine and dine of sorts. So you can see the place is somewhat spacious. And you can see here that the theme is somewhat rustic. So you have different places where you can hang out. And they're very hush-hush about the identity, obviously. Well, if they're hush-hush about the identity, then why are they advertising that certain people, famous people, have been to their place? So how do you balance that? Like similar to how Fight Club works, you don't talk about the club, but they want to advertise it so that people would know that there is such a place like this one. Anyway, they're bragging that they have people like Elon Musk, Kim Kardashian, Eric Adams, and then mayor-elect of New York City, and you have Eric Schmidt, Google's former CEO. So is it Is it something that you need to visit, to go maybe once, if you can afford it? And the question is, will it be a sustainable model here? Now, obviously, I think that's why you have clubs, party clubs that are very popular, especially for famous people who wants to hang out, to enjoy. That's why it's popular. But for this type of setting, it's more on a relaxed setting here. Maybe there's a market for that. Who knows? But will it still be there in a year or in the next 5 years here? Who knows? But businesses have to be creative nowadays to find ways to attract new customers or patrons here in this case. Anyway, I think that concludes our discussion for this week. Come back again on Friday for more business focused live. All the topics that we've discussed today, I'll leave the link in the description below. You can also leave your comments below if you have any question on today's topics, or if you agree or disagree with the topics that I've said today. Then I'll try to get back to you and share my insights as well. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Same time, same channel. Take care.